All right, welcome everybody again. My name is Marushka. I am one of the student affairs advisors at International TEFL Academy. And I want to thank you all for joining this webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking about teaching in South Korea, working with one of our preferred partners, Teach English in Korea, also short for TEIK. So today we'll be talking specifically with Bradley. Bradley Brennan is the founder and owner of TEIK, and he is an amazing partner. He has helped a lot of students find work in South Korea. Before we actually get started with discussing what the topic will be today, we want to give you some preliminary guidelines for the webinar today. So you will be muted. To get started, you will be muted for the entirety of the presentation. And you will stay muted throughout the webinar. And that's just so we don't have a lot of people talking at the same time throughout the webinar. We do have a chat box and a Q&A box. And today we're going to be using the Q&A box for any questions that you may have during or after the webinar. So at this point, we will no longer use the chat box. And so please make sure that you put your question in the Q&A box. We will not be able to answer questions that are in the chat box, so make sure you submit them in the Q&A box. In the Q&A box, you will notice that you can comment on, or you can upvote questions. So if you ask someone, or if you see a question that someone else asked, and you would like that question answered, just go ahead and upvote that question. This will help us prioritize questions that many of you may have, and that you want to make sure to get those answers to those questions. So for some reason, if we're not able to get through all the questions, we would at least have prioritized the questions that everyone wants to hear in the chat today. We do have an extended 20 minutes or so Q&A session today. So we will get into a lot of time for you to ask the questions directly to Bradley. And we will not be answering any unrelated TEIK questions. So if you have any questions that are very specific to your case, or you have questions that are not related to job searching in South Korea, then we would ask you to contact your advisor at studentaffairs@internationalteflacademy.com, or my co-host Jasira will actually help answer maybe a few questions here and there, but not extensively, because we really want to focus on teaching in South Korea. In the Q&A box, you'll see an all questions section and a my questions section. This is so that you can either view all of the questions that have been submitted, or only view the questions that you asked. We will have an extended, like I said, 15 to 20 minutes Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And then after the webinar, we will send you out the TEIK application link, so you can go ahead and apply directly with TEIK if you want to work with them as a recruiter. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. So if for some reason you're having technical difficulties during the presentations, or you have to leave early for any reason, this webinar will be sent out via email tomorrow, and you will be able to rewatch the recorded version. And we will also include the application link tomorrow in the follow-up email. With that, I'll set the stage for Bradley. So Bradley can go ahead and take over and get us started with the webinar.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for attending. I will try to answer all the questions I can at the end. Let's go ahead and get started. So I just realized that it said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but actually I added a slide. So it's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 6 is 6 popular places to live and work. I think most of you are probably pretty curious about what it's like to work and live in South Korea. You know, I originally came here way back in the day, 20 plus years ago, and Korea's changed a lot, and definitely it's become more and more of an amazing place. And of course, the culture, food, everything is great. But you know, one thing I just realized you're on mute, so you can't answer this question, but maybe you can put it in the chat. But test your knowledge just a little bit. You know, how big do you think South Korea is? If you had to compare it to any state, which state do you think South Korea is about the same size of? This one you can answer in the chat. Oh, smaller than Florida. Any other guess? Or a guess? Guesses? Oh, there we go. Half the size of Minnesota. A little bit bigger than that. Vermont, bigger. South Carolina, I'm not sure. North Carolina, Cali, New Jersey. Indiana, Evan Pitt, good job. Yes, South Korea is about the size of Indiana. Why am I telling you this? Because you see that blue mark there? I made this chart for you. That blue part is Indiana. Well, every person I talk to, I try to put it into perspective of why Korea is like Korea and why it's different than the States. Why? Well, Indiana has 4 million people, but Korea's got 52 million people. And an amazing thing is if you look on South Korea and USA, that chart that I made, if you look about the 25 largest cities in the United States, actually about 30 or 35, South Korea has very similar size cities. Now imagine taking the 30 largest cities in the United States and putting them in the state of Indiana. And then take 25 of those 30 cities and putting them into the northwest suburbs of Indiana. That's Seoul and Gyeonggi-do. You know, think of a big donut. The center of the donut is like 10 million people, and that big part of the donut is 17 million people. And right next to that donut is another big chunk. That's Incheon. Incheon's 3.8 million people. So that's like 22, 23 million people in just the northwest suburbs of Indiana. So when people say, oh, you know, I'm not sure where I'm going to go, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. You can go from the very top left corner to the bottom right corner from Seoul to Busan. That's about 500 kilometers, about 300 miles. You can get there in 2.5 hours by taking high-speed train. Korea is the most connected, easy to get around place with super cheap, super clean and efficient public transportation. It's one of the best things about South Korea, I think. You know, everybody says, where do you want to go? Everybody's like, Seoul. Well, because I realize most people only know Seoul, maybe Busan, Incheon, but a lot of places they don't know well about. The reason I told you about Seoul and Gyeonggi-do is because Seoul, if you look, remember that donut I was telling you about, Seoul is surrounded by about a dozen cities that are more than 1 million people. And when I first came to Korea, everybody was like, oh, where are you from? And I would say Tacoma. They don't know where Tacoma is. And I would say Seattle. They didn't know Seattle. And I'd say, oh, Seattle. Seattle. But they'll say, I know the movie Sleepless in Seattle. And they say, oh, big city, Seattle. And I said, no, Seattle's 750,000 people. And that's like the downtown area. But it's about 2 million if you look at greater Seattle, all of King County. But the point that I'm making is there's a dozen cities the size of Seattle that surround Seoul. And it's all 30 minutes to an hour to downtown central Seoul by subway. I live in Incheon, in Cheongna International City, which is a brand new city. It's only 36 minutes by subway to Central Seoul Station, right in the center of Seoul. And I'm not even in Gyeonggi-do or Seoul. That's how good the public transportation is. And it costs about $1.50 to get there. So Seoul, everybody knows of Seoul. That's the Lotte Tower right there in Chongcheon, in the southeastern or the eastern part of Seoul. Seoul is massive. It's over a huge distance. And you know, Seoul is just like Manhattan. It's very cosmopolitan, but also it's the hardest place to get placed in. Why? There's so many people applying for the jobs. So if you're a first-year teacher, Seoul is one of the hardest places to get into, unless you're an education major, English major, have a year of ESL teaching experience, etc. So it's better to be in a city with a good job, and you know, you can always move to Seoul after having a year of experience. But another place is Gyeonggi-do. Gyeonggi-do, there's so many good satellite cities. Like I said, I originally came to Bucheon, which is one of the major satellite cities. I absolutely loved it. I lived there for 7 years, and I still have an apartment there. It's great. So Gyeonggi-do, the one on the left, that's right by, that's in Bucheon, actually. Those are leave the state. The one on the right is in Bundang. That's another major popular, the 3-4 first satellite cities that were built 25 years ago. That's Bundang. Also, the one on the left, that's Ilsan. It's a huge lake park, super popular. I live in Cheongna, which also has a huge lake park like that, canal system. The one on the right is Gimpo. That's another major city that's right in between Incheon and Seoul. So the reason I'm showing you these photos is the satellite cities are very modern. And they range anywhere from 500,000 to about 1.5 million people. If you really want to get placed easily, I would say, okay, well, just say you want to be in a major city. What is a major city? Well, 1 million plus people. And that's like Incheon, 3.8 million people. That's Songdo, one of the first and the largest new city. If you look past that building on the on the other side of the water, that's where Cheongna is, the second new international city. Other super popular places to get places like Daegu. Daegu probably is one of the most popular places for expat teachers. Why? If you look at Seoul or Busan, there's some areas where foreigners hang out, but they're all over the place. In Daegu, it's 2.8, almost 2.9 million people. But in Daegu, all of the expat bars and restaurants are like on a 2-block radius. So after a few weekends, you kind of meet everybody, and they have like softball leagues, soccer leagues, baseball leagues. They have everything. So when expats go there, they tend to stay for quite some time. Other major cities like Gwangju is about 1.5 million people. And of course, Busan is very popular, and that's Haeundae Beach. You gotta visit there at least during your year or more in Korea, and that's 3.5 million people as well. So just, like those 5 or 6 major cities, we're talking anywhere from 2 to 12 million people in these different cities. Another popular place to be placed is a medium-sized city. I mentioned before, my hometown is actually in Washington State, Tacoma, Washington. Tacoma is the second largest city in Washington State. That's about 450,000 people. But there's about 40 cities, 50 cities in Korea that are like 500,000 plus, which is actually quite a large city. I mean, as an American, but in Korea, that's pretty common. And in small cities, they say under 300,000. Like I live in Cheongna, that's about 200,000 people. But we have our own city center. We have a massive lake park, canal system that goes through there. You can take boat rides. It's brand new, wide sidewalks. It looks like you're in the States basically, because it's such a new city. 8 years ago it was a tidal mud flat. Now it's all high-rise apartment buildings, and it's beautiful. And coastal and island, there's lots of places along the coast that are a great place where you're still within an urban placement of like 300,000 to 500,000 people, but you're near nature as well, which is quite nice. And this one is Jeju Island. And I always kind of laugh when I think of Jeju, because in Jeju Island, I lived in Korea for 6 years and I'd never been, but everybody said, oh, it's the Hawaii of Korea. And I was thinking, bullshit. But I went there and it was absolutely beautiful, but it's not Hawaii, as I thought, but it's absolutely beautiful. And you can see the top left corner is Chunmun Resort area. That's the really, kind of the high end area, but it's someplace you have to visit. As I mentioned, the first 6 years, I had never visited Jeju. And then when I did, for a business trip, I went 2 more times in the same year. That's how much I loved it. The food was amazing. The people were friendly, and it doesn't look anything like the rest of Korea. Well, five reasons to teach in South Korea. The easiest one are the benefits. I've been placing teachers in South Korea since 2005 when I started my recruitment agency. And that's when I was working for the Korean government. And I know all the different areas or the different countries that you can go teach in. Maybe Japan or Hong Kong, you can make a little bit more money, but in Korea, you can save way more money than any country teaching English. Why? Well, the benefits are awesome. You get free housing, whereas in like Japan or Hong Kong, you have to pay a lot of your income for your housing, which is, for free in Korea. You get national health insurance, which is amazing. It's universal health care, and it costs about $50 a month. That's deducted out of your pay. You get a bonus. You work 12 months, you get paid for 13. The pension, being American or North American, Canadian, you pay into the pension, the school matches. It's about $100 deducted per month. The school matches that, so it's about $200 a month. You get it all back plus interest, at least 5%. Whether that's 1 year, 5 years, or 9 years and a bit, because at 10 years, you could be fully vested and you can get an annuity instead of the lump sum, which is much better to do. The airfare, Several years ago, it was common to get a return airfare, but now most schools do one-way airfare to Korea, or if you're in Korea, a one-way ticket back home. And it's usually reimbursed. Some schools will buy it up front for you, but most schools will have you purchase it and then reimburse it on their first paycheck. Low cost of living, with the skyrocketing prices and inflation going crazy. Korea's not been hit that bad. I mean, of course, inflation has happened here, but already the cost of living was much cheaper. So you can easily get by, and I'm talking like living well on $1,000 a month. So you should be able to save at least 40 or 50% of your pay. I know teachers that come here and they spend every penny of it and they go traveling and they have an amazing time. But I tell everybody, you're stupid if you don't save at least $1,000 a month, and you're still living very well. Why? You get free housing. You're only paying about $150 a month for your phone, your electric, your Wi-Fi. And if you like Korean food is cheap. It's cheaper to go out for Korean food than it is to make it at home usually. What's more expensive if you like to eat a lot of Western food. But for questions later, I have lots of good tips for where to order food and how to order online. The culture and people, amazing. I used to work for the 한국관광공사, the Korea Tourism Organization in Seoul and also in Chicago for a long time. And my job was promoting Korea, and I absolutely love to. Why? I love the culture and the people. Being an American, we live in a very highly individualistic society where, being different and doing our own thing is prized above anything. Where in Korea, collectivism or communalism is the name of the game, where everybody tries to do everything together, what's best for the group. I absolutely love that. I'll talk about Korean food later, but I love sitting around a table and we cook the food together. We sit in a circle and you talk while you cook and you eat. To me, and everything's about sharing. Sharing is caring in Korea, and that's for sure. And the people are amazing. I'll tell you, you'll get reverse culture shock going home, which I went through. Why? In America, you may be a wallflower, but in Korea, you could be a bit of a rock star because kids will walk right up to you and just say, "Oh, hi, how are you doing? My name is Kimchi Bum," and they'll turn around and run away. They're so curious, and the kids nowadays, their English level is so good that they're not afraid to talk to you. You'll get middle school kids walking up to you in the subway saying, "Hi, my name is Kim Hee-sun. May I speak with you?" You're like, "Yes." "Oh, I go to such and such middle school. My hobbies are blah, blah." And, these types of interactions are things that you'll always remember and tell people back home about when you go home. And here's a picture of a teacher, and there's so many different holidays, and every month they'll do birthdays for all the kids. Let's say January, all the kids in January birthday, then they'll have this type of thing at schools. It's really nice when they do. Travel opportunities, it's awesome. After my first year, I tell every teacher, you need to prepare for your exit. What does that mean? Well, once you hit that, the first 4 months is kind of the big learning curve of learning how to teach, and you teach all that material. After 4 months, it becomes, really, really easy after you get over the hump. Why? You start circulating through kids. You're teaching the exact same material, but you're just teaching different kids every month or every few months. So it becomes very easy. And what I say about this is, you have lots of travel opportunities during Chuseok, Solar. These are 5-day holidays during the end of your contract. Once you hit that 6-month mark, I tell everybody, start planning that awesome trip. I did the same thing. Myself and 3 other English teachers, we went to Thailand for 3 weeks and Malaysia for a month. I spent $1,700, including my flight to Thailand. And we had the most amazing time of our lives. And I think everybody should do that before they go back. Enjoy Southeast Asia. It's dirt cheap to travel, and it's amazing, right? And here again, that Busan was my first trip in South Korea domestically. I can give you lots of tips of where to go and when to go. This photo is a little bit dated because there's so many more high-rise apartment buildings in the background nowadays. This photo is about 10 years old, I guess. But food, to me, it's the best thing about Korea. I absolutely love Korean food. I didn't realize I liked spicy food until I came to South Korea. You know, I found out I'm the black sheep of my family where I truly love spicy food. You know, of course, if you don't like spicy food, there's tons of other food that you can have that is not spicy, like bulgogi, kalbi, japchae, all these different nice dishes. But Korea has such a culinary delight, and if anybody has any food issues, like maybe you're vegan or vegetarian, etc., if you have any questions for me, I can give you good information at the end of in the Q&A as well. And where to shop to buy Western style food is also good to know. And here, it's my favorite meal is going out for Korean barbecue, whether that's my favorite samgyeopsal or beef or whatever, and all the side dishes that come with it. The side dishes are called panchan. I could spend an hour talking about just what you're seeing in this photo, but that's one of the best things about Korea. And the last one, the most important, you can save bucket loads of money. I can answer more questions about that. Everybody always asks me about private classes, making extra money, etc. That's something we can go over if you're interested in knowing more about. I can definitely answer questions about that. Yeah, there you go. That's the Korean manwon, 50,000 won. It's about $45 or so. Yep. Four things to prepare for Korea. Now, this is kind of getting into the more nuts and bolts about what you need to do. When I say about this, you know, there's the most important thing. Here, it's about the visa documents. And, you know, the other stuff, I can spend a lot more time talking about the food, the culture, the people living in Korea, working, where to go, where to see, things like that. But the visa documents are kind of the mundane thing that we all have to get our ducks in a row before we go. So what do you need? Number one is your your criminal record check. For Americans, you need the FBI criminal record check. For Canadians, it's the RCMP check. The DBS for British, and I can't remember the exact name, but it's the National Criminal Record Check for South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland. Now, your bachelor's degree, you also need a bachelor's degree, and you need both of these with apostille notarization. Let me say firstly about the criminal record check, the majority are probably Americans. The easiest way, and you can get it within 2 weeks, is if you go through an approved FBI channeler. When I say an approved FBI channeler, you just Google FBI approved channelers, a list will come right up on the FBI's website. And the first one on there is accurate biometrics. That's another name for live scan. What is live scan and why is it great? Well, you go, almost every city has them. You just go in and they literally scan your fingerprints instead of going to your local police station and then ink printing, you know, your fingerprints and then mailing them there. They have to scan every one of those fingerprints. It takes 3 weeks to like 5 weeks for them to do it, and like a week for them to process it. Now, what's important is by doing a live scan, they immediately electronically transfer your fingerprints to the FBI, and they're able to do the check. And they normally email you a PDF of the FBI criminal record check in about 1 to 2 weeks. Live scan, I think the longest is usually about 10 business days. And then your BA degree, I can talk also about people who are probably graduating this spring, don't have their degree yet. There's also a way around that. It's called a letter of graduation. So your bachelor's degree, most people don't realize this, but you can just photocopy it, go to your local bank manager. Every bank manager just about is a public notary in your state. So for example, if I'm in Washington State, I could just walk into my local bank and say, hi, I'd like to have this document notarized, your copy of your bachelor's degree or the letter of graduation. And then you just walk in and you say, okay, here's my diploma, here's my photocopy of my diploma. I'm going to write on this photocopy, this is a copy of an original document. Then you sign it and date it in front of the public notary. They're not trying to verify the authenticity of this document. All their job is to make sure that Your signature on your driver's license or passport is the same that you just put on that document. They will stamp it. Then you can just take it to your state apostille's office for anywhere from as little as $2 to about $20, and then you can get it apostille notarized. The criminal record check, I highly recommend. I can give this information at the end as a link. I wrote a blog post about this on how to get your apostille notarization in 2 to 3 business days for both your criminal record check or your bachelor's degree photocopy. Don't believe it when they say it takes 6 to 8 weeks. If you send it to the monument visa and you don't do special instructions, they will send it to the Department of State, which takes 6 to 8 weeks to process. But if you say that you want the Virginia State Apostille, that takes 2 to 3 days. Not every state will notarize a federal document, but Virginia will. And the great thing is, Monument Visa is literally across the street from the Virginia State Apostille's office. So they walk over and they do drop-in service and they get it done that day. Pay the extra $10, and then they will scan it before they send it back to you. Pay the expedited shipping of $20. It'll cost you $85 to get the FBI background check notarized by the apostille. And you can also get your bachelor's degree apostille notarized by the Virginia State for, I think it's like $20-30 extra. So both of those will only take 2 or 3 days to get done. So do not worry if you don't have any of your documents. You can get everything in order in 3 weeks or less. That's one thing that most people don't realize, but I can give you that link to my blog post that I wrote about that. Passport. Your passport must have at least 6 months validity left, and some space in there as well. There's been some changes. This is a bit frustrating as well, is that every Korean consulate in the States is a little bit different, but they're mostly the same. Some will not require your actual passport. Some will require a notarized copy of passport, which means you do the same thing. You walk into your bank with your passport, a photocopy of it, you get it notarized, and then you send it in lieu of your passport. And then this way, it's actually better. They just email you a PDF of your visa. Some of the consulates require you to send your actual passport, and they put the visa in the passport. Just hopefully you don't have to go through the Seattle or Vancouver Korean consulates, because the Seattle one takes a minimum of 4 weeks to process a visa. Vancouver is the worst at 5 weeks, but most of the other Korean consulates take about 2 weeks to process a visa. And just one more thing, normally the visa process, let's say you get a job today, you had an interview, you liked the school, you talked to a teacher, saw housing photos, you accepted the contract. Well, from when you FedEx your documents to Korea, that process takes about a month until you have your visa in hand. So the documents, they get sent to Korea. And there's also a way to shave off a week, but I can talk about that in the questions later. But your documents take about 5 business days to get to the school. They apply for your visa issuance number, which takes 5 to 10 business days. And then we email you the visa number with very detailed instructions and tell you which consulate to apply to. Then you have to apply to your closest Korean consulate that you're in their jurisdiction. You can't apply to anyone that you want. You have to do it within your state's, whatever the jurisdiction is. And then it takes them on average about 10 business days to process the visa. And then most people ask about the flights. When can I buy my flights? It's so expensive right now, yes. But you can't really buy your flights until you know when you're getting your visa. And also your school has to approve the itinerary, because you know of when you're coming into Korea, and also the price if you want to get reimbursed. There's another thing about that. Oh yeah, and also you need to have your TEFL certificate. You know, you don't need a TEFL certificate for the visa itself, but every school basically requires you to have at least 120-hour TEFL certificate. Yes, I always get, well, you know, I'm fluent English speaker. Can I teach in Korea? No, because you have to be a native English speaker. You also have to have grown up in a native English English-speaking country. You also have to graduate from a university that's in one of the 7 approved countries for an E2 visa. That's Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, Ireland, South Africa, and the UK. Even if you're say, I'm American, but I went to the American University in Paris. Sorry, no, they won't accept your bachelor's degree. Oh, I graduated from Quebec. Nope, they won't accept it because the Quebec is a French-speaking part of Canada. So you have to be careful about that. I can answer questions about that in the Q&A. The visa application itself is just a form you fill out. We send you the form and you fill out what you can and what you can't. The school fills out for you. And then a very sensitive thing is the health check. This is a self-health check that you fill out. It's going to ask you, are you an alcoholic? Are you a drug addict? Do you have mental health disorders? If you answer yes to any of the questions, it may prevent you from getting a visa for South Korea. However, if you do take medication or have taken medication for mental health issues, we can talk about that because as long as the school is fine, you can get a letter from your doctor explaining why you take or what you take, etc. And we've had very good record of being able to get visas for teachers that are taking, for example, anxiety medicine or anxiety drugs or whatnot, or whatever the reason may be. But it could prevent you from and that's in the Q&A. I can go over that as well because I have options which I tell teachers that they can do if you're in that situation. But if you do lie on the form and it's found out that you did lie, they will cancel your visa. But remember the health check, the only way they would know is if you told them that you are taking that medicine or the drug test that you take when you come to Korea. One more thing about that, when you come to Korea, within the first week, you have to take a drug test. They're going to check for any type of illegal drugs. That means marijuana. They're going to check for HIV. They're going to check for some communicable diseases, etc. And you have to pass it. That's the requirement to be able to get an ARC card, an alien registration card. That you can't open a full bank account without an ARC card. You can't make a contract for a smartphone. That's another one in the Q&A I'm sure I'll get is like, what do I do about my American phone? How do I get a phone number in Korea, etc. I'm sure if you have questions, I can go into detail about that. You can open a bank account with just your passport, but it's a limited bank account. So it's better to wait. The ARC card takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to get. Once you have your ARC card, that number is also your national healthcare number and you're registered. I'm sure if you have some questions about that, I'd love to talk at length about how wonderful the national health insurance is in Korea. It's your best friend being here. I have tons of stories about people who've had a medical emergency and they've paid almost nothing or very close to nothing. Sorry, I talked a lot about that because the visa documents part is very important. It's the most important thing for you because you have to have a visa to be able to teach in Korea. If you're Kyoko or Korean adoptee, there's an added layer of things that you're going to have to do. And if anybody has any specific questions about that in the Q&A, I'm happy to answer. I can't talk about specifically, but I can talk about in general. Teaching materials. One thing that we do for our teachers, I've made a presentation with a PDF with hundreds and hundreds of teachers materials for links, for URLs, for websites, for games, for how to make crosswords. You just dump in the words and it creates crosswords. There's so many things, but I tell everybody, buy and bring a deck of Uno cards. Some word search, go to Target or dollar store, you can find these forever. Some extra teaching materials, but most schools, they provide a full curriculum and there's always questions about that. It depends on which school you get placed at, and I can talk about in general about different school chains and curriculums and things like that. But do some research before you go. Like, what are some, teaching materials that I should have brought, going to South Korea? That you'll get a ton of different articles about that. like for here, there's so many different games that you can bring, and there's certain things that you can do. It's always good, and you have to learn walking, walking, jump, jump, jump. That's kindergarten crack right there. You'll make thousands of dollars doing that song. There's so many different things like memory game. And I can talk to you about classroom management. I'm a master teacher. I have an education degree. I taught for ages. I'm a full-time professor here. So yes, I'm not teaching kids now, but I did teach for 7 years teaching children. So survival Korean, everybody asks about that. That's very important. Why? You need to be able to, have 30 questions of, how much is it? Dakachizeo, please give me a discount. Oh, things like this, omana koyo, how long does it take? Where's the bathroom? You need to learn at least 30 sentences. But check out this one, the wiki, how to speak Korean. That's a really good article that talks about all the basics, and it gives a lot of free information. And that's something that I tell everybody that they should try to learn at least 30 sentences. Korean people love it when you speak. Even if you say "안녕하세요," they're like, "How are you?" They're like, "Oh my God, your Korean is so good!" And you only know one sentence, but it makes their heart jump with joy because you're learning their language. Mindset. I think that's the most important thing. And I tell everybody, you go in, and let's say two people go to Korea, they have the exact same experience, the same job, the exact everything. One person goes back to home and says, I had the most amazing time of my life. The other person says, I hated it, right? It's all about your mindset. You have to remember, Koreans made Korea, so it's comfortable for Koreans, not us visiting Americans or British or Canadians. And the ones that can't get over that Korea is different than their home country, those people are poison. And you're like, in Korea or in America, it's like this. In America, we do it because they can't believe that another country does better than them. And that's ethnocentrism. If you go in the mindset of, hey, I'm easy to laugh at myself. I'm gonna have a good time. I'm gonna be open, positive, outgoing. Even if you're not the most outgoing person, you need to be, at least for the first few months, and you need to know how to put on your teacher mask and perform. Because if you teach kindergarten, no, you don't teach kindergarten, you perform. And then I can answer more direct questions about teaching, classroom management skills. I have my own way of doing it, which, may work for you, may not. That's why I say always try to watch other master teachers because you learn from them. Interview tips. It's very easy, but I feel some people have problems interviewing. Well, it's very easy, and I'll show you how. If you want to get hired easily, make a self-introduction video and a demo lesson. If you want to do just the very basic, this is Kwang Han Moon, by the way. A 2-minute, if you just go into YouTube and just type in, ESL teaching jobs, 2-minute self-intro video. There's tons and tons of really good examples. Where are you from? Why you want to teach in Korea? Why you're excited to teach? Why you're outgoing? Why you love kids? If you touch on those things and say a little bit about your hometown and why you're so eager to learn about Korean culture and have that experience in Korea, that goes a long way in getting interviews. And if you want, especially if you're wanting to go and be placed in Seoul, you need to make a demo lesson. Why? Just same thing. Go to YouTube, type in, kindergarten ESL demo lesson. Oh, how to do pronunciation, how to do, teach the color, body parts, whatever it is. And then you show them that, hey, you look like you can do it. You can make a teacher voice. You do like this. That is the easiest and the best and most effective way to get a job in Korea. Also, interview, physical setup. I laugh sometimes because I cannot believe some people how unprepared they are for interviews. Remember that how you set up is indicative of how you're going to be as a teacher. If you don't care to spend 2 minutes on making sure that your phone, if you're using your phone for video, is at eye level instead of on your desk looking up your nose, or dressing appropriately. Guys, don't wear a tie, but wear a button-up collared shirt. If you have any piercings or visible tattoos, cover up your tattoos. at least for the first few weeks that you're there. If you have like nose piercing or excessive piercing, take them out. Koreans don't also like facial hair. I can tell you a funny story about that. I tell everybody, for guys, if you're okay, make sure you're clean shaven when you have your interview. You can always grow your beard back. That's something that really helps for getting hired. And then mental setup and questions for school. Mental setup is this: prepare yourself. Remember, what are schools looking for? They're looking for teachers who are fun. Number one, fun. You have to realize private schools are a business first and a place of learning second. What does that mean? That means, the golden circle. If you want to be successful at your school, you're going to have fun in your class first and foremost. Why? When little Johnny goes home and then the mom says, do you like your school? And they say, yes, I like my school. They pay for another month. And if they say, no, I don't like my school, it's not fun, they go to a different hagwon next door. And that's, basically that golden circle is the kid says, yeah, I love going to that school. The mother pays another month, the director is happy, and you are good as gold. And mental setup also, remember, you got to bring the energy, because most of these positions, 80% are kindergarten in the morning, elementary school in the afternoon. They want fun, bubbly, outgoing, talkative people. The worst thing that people do in their interviews, they give short answers and they don't smile. And you think it's just common sense. I understand people are nervous, but this is a time where you get to have fun in the interview to basically tell people, why you're so passionate about coming 6,000 miles to a different country to teach their children. So I always say, bring the energy, bring the fun. When you answer a question, always give too much information instead of not enough. Also, be excited, but don't ramble on so fast that people can't follow you. So speak, very clearly, good intonation, etc. Make sure you speak in a teacher's voice. And also, you should always prepare a couple questions for the school. Do not ask, well, what's the pay, the benefits, whatever. That's later when they offer you a contract. That's all going to be in there, right? And that shows that you're not interested in the students. You're interested in what is my benefit for teaching. So have questions that are stuff like, can you tell me a little bit about a typical day in your school? What is the schedule like? Can you tell me like, what kind of classes would I be teaching? What's the level of the kids? How many kids are in the class? Can you tell me something about the curriculum? Is there do you have like a website that can send me like, different things where I can learn about your curriculum? That shows you are engaged and on point, that you want to be a good teacher and you're flexible, right? Number two, red flags to avoid. This is, not if you go through me, but if you go through any recruiter, including myself, there's red flags. And I say, every school should always give you a current teacher's contact information. We always provide a current teacher's email address that you can contact, that you can either, exchange emails or set up a Skype call with them, etc. Why is that good? It doesn't matter if you read something online from 5 years ago or whatever about a school, and I'll talk specifically about that in the Q&A, about this is the most important thing, talking to a current teacher. Why? They have their finger on the pulse of the school. They can tell you exactly what it's like to work at the school. Excuse me. The second thing are housing photos. We always provide housing photos. Usually they're sample photos, which means that they're the housing of a current teacher, or they may be the actual housing that you'll be moving into. Normally we provide these, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months before you go there. So normally they're the sample housing photos of current teachers. Those two things I think are very important that every recruiter should provide to you. And if they don't, it's a huge red flag. So, I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a mile a minute, but there's so many things I want to say to you. But, out of all those things I was talking about, a little bit about us, we are your partner to assist you. There's other recruiters that you can go through, but I feel like we give a different experience. That's my son, and our apartments are just off to the right there in Chongna. Why TEIK? There's a good thing. And who are we basically? That's another thing as well, our story. But why TEIK? Well, we have a really good history. We started off in 2005 when I was working for the Korean government. Through serendipity a little bit, I ended up creating this recruitment agency. Why? We'd moved back. I worked for the Korean government for 2 years in Seoul, and then I worked for the Korean government. I quit there to work for the Hankook 관광공사, the Korea Tourism Organization in Chicago, as a regional marketing manager for the entire Midwest. My wife worked for KOTRA, the Korea Trade Organization, so she also worked for the Korean government when we lived in downtown Chicago. Um, and some directors contacted me about, oh, can you help me find a good teacher like you? And I just, said, no, sure, no problem. And I did it for them. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, another director who was a friend of that director contacted me, and then it kind of turned into this business. Well, my wife and I, we moved back to Korea in 2012. I became a full-time professor because the guy right there, we wanted to be able to have a child. We've been married a long time with no kids. So we decided to come back to Korea. So I'm a full-time professor, but I teach 2 days a week and I get 5 months vacation. So I spend almost all my time doing our business. My wife, when we moved back, she started working for our business full-time. Her name is Yumi. You work with both of us. Yumi works with about 60 different schools. I work with about 17 or 18 schools. So we share the same teachers, but we have different positions that, to fit different, places that people want to go, or, different schedules, etc. Um, yeah, so that's how we kind of started in this. And also we started placing teachers for ITA when ITA was before ITA actually, when the owner of ITA opened in 2010, I think it was, we actually, I placed a few of the IT coordinators, at least one of them in South Korea. So they always promoted us, which was great. So we've been placing teachers without any issues for ITA for 10 plus years. And we really pride ourselves on that. Why? We go by our motto, and it's no bullshit, no drama. I think that really resonates with people. Why? Well, I'm a full-time professor. I can't deal with drama because trying to fit round pegs into square holes. We look for a win-win situation. We listen to you. We empathize. We want to make sure that it's a great fit for you and for the school. When we say no bullshit, we tell very directly, we answer very directly. And, we expect that with the teachers as well, because that way we have no problem. When someone's completely honest with you and you can understand that, hey, we want what's best for you and the school, we don't want any drama. That's why we have very few problems. With regards to other, like Korean recruiters, they want to place as many people as possible, regardless if it's good for you, but it's good for them. And so I think that's one of the biggest differences you'll find with our recruitment agency. And I always say that we're a boutique recruitment agency. Why? That's the team right there, the two of us. And I think that, hey, we'll be honest with you. It's like I said, I'm a full-time professor. My wife and I both worked for the Korean government for 10 years. Well, our word and our reputation is everything to us. So the last part is our promise. We promise to work hard for you. We can't promise you that we'll place every single person, but we will try to work with every person that we can. We're an equal opportunity recruitment agency. We try to help everybody that we can. We give our interviews and kind of see what's best, and then kind of go from there. And we only want to work with people who truly want that kind of working relationship. If you're not serious about coming to Korea and teach, don't contact us. And we say that to everybody. We get people that that are just like, oh, I want to have the Korea life. I want to do because Gangnam Style, and oh, I love K-pop, and they're all about that. And I'm like, well, that's great and all, and we're happy that you love Korean culture, but you're coming here to teach. You're not coming here to do University 2.0. You're coming here to teach and to have a job, and of course enjoy the culture, the place, all the things that come with that. But your first and foremost thing should be you love kids. you really want to teach, you're passionate about teaching, and you want to contribute to the society. And remember, every one of you is an ambassador for your country. So what you do in Korea, that helps to shape how they view us, us expats. And like I said, we promise to do whatever we can to help you. And we're very honest and upfront about everything. So with that, you should, to work with us, you should go to the ITA link to apply. That'll be there in the PowerPoint so that you're able to use that for being able to send us the application. Oh, that's the end. And I guess it's now time to move on to Q&A. I'm sorry, I talked a mile a minute. But there's a lot of things I still want to say, but I thought it's better to wait to see what you want to hear, and then that way we can kind of go from there. So should I stop sharing the screen?
It's definitely up to you, Brad, but thank you so much. You shared so much good information already, and we wanted to make sure that you do have some time to answer some of the questions. We may or may not get through all of the questions, but we'll stay over time just to make sure that we answer as many questions as possible for folks who have time to stay after 10:30 today. So I guess just to get started, I'll start with the upvoted questions first, the ones with the most upvotes. So one question says, I'm leaning towards working for a Hagwon as I've heard you have more flexibility as to when you arrive. However, what are the overall benefits and drawbacks of working for Hagwon? Some people have
Hagwon compared to public school?
Yes.
Right. So there's a difference. Both have positives and negatives, right? So working for EPIK is the English program in Korea. It's a great program. But it's very different than what you're probably expecting, because EPIK, you have no control, no choice of where you're going to be placed. And just a little history about EPIK, every year they get rid of 5 or 10% of the positions. So now all of the major cities are gone. Now it's all mostly countryside. And you could be teaching at 2 or 3 different elementary schools. I do a lot of mentoring for teachers, and we have a lot of EPIK teachers that I give presentations, cross-cultural communication, etc. And a lot of them, they teach, one school, one day, they teach, they may have to travel. The best thing is the vacation. They get a month vacation, usually 2 weeks at winter, 2 weeks at summer. They have to teach during the vacation times where it's a month, but they have like special classes. The other benefit for some people is you're a teacher's assistant. That means you're basically okay, I'm gonna say, okay, say, how are you? Oh, how are you? Okay, then you basically are there to just, say stuff, whatever they say. For some people, they really like that. Some people, they don't. You don't really have your own class. You're a teacher's assistant. Whereas at a Hagwon, and it could be anywhere from 20 to 50 kids in a class. Private schools, there's a huge flexibility. You can choose where you want to get placed. Are there positives and negatives? Of course there is. Are some private schools better than other ones? Of course there are. And also I'll say this, the schools we work with, we always keep in touch with our teachers. Why? Because it's like literally keeping our finger on the pulse of the school. We know it's good when we started working with them. By keeping in contact with the schools or with the teachers, we know that the school continues to be good. And I think that flexibility, having your own class, it's 10 days paid vacation instead of, whatever it is for the private school. And having your own class and teaching how you want to teach is also a big plus. And the biggest one is you know exactly where you're going before you come to Korea. So did I answer everything?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Brent. The next question, I've heard it's better and less stressful for some people to teach in more rural areas in Korea. Is that true? One of my friends taught in Korea for a few years and she taught in a school in the country. Is it difficult to get a job there?
Right. So you're saying that it's more stressful or less stressful to teach in the countryside?
Oh, they're asking if it's better or less stressful to work in the countryside.
Well, it depends, right? It depends on, if you like countryside. We don't place a lot of people in rural areas Why? Because a lot of people, even though they want rural areas, they later are like, oh, it's too rural or whatever. So we say small city, that's like under 300,000. If someone says, oh, no, I really want like a small town type, we could, contact some schools, et cetera. But I would say that even like the smallest schools we work with are like 200,000, 150,000, 200,000 people in the city, or you could be very close to a bigger city. That's very common. But there are benefits to the smaller cities. Let's say, for example, we had some teachers who are professional, they graduated with an education degree. And one girl goes straight to my mind. She went on and on and on about how she only wanted Gangnam because she had this thing about, oh, I was a student and in Gangnam and I want the Gangnam life and blah, blah, blah. Well, there's some things that come with that. That's the richest area of the one of the richest cities in the world, right? So the expectations are here. And after 3 months, she basically was just like, I can't take it because some moms would put notes in about her hair. They're like, oh, we don't like that you're doing your hair up. It should be down or whatever it was, and it was like they are very high expectation. Why? They're paying $1,500 for their kid to go to kindergarten at 3 years old or 4 years old, um, so they have very high expectations. But if you go to Gyeonggi-do, surrounding Seoul, the expectations are a bit lower and more laid back. And of course, the smaller cities, the housing is actually larger. Why? Because they spend about the same amount of money for the free housing, not free, but they pay something. But the housing is better in smaller cities. Also, it's more laid back. Like I said, in Seoul, especially, very competitive. So they're all about the curriculum. So a lot of teachers, some will complain like, I have too much to go through. And some schools, like in the smaller cities, they're like, oh, I don't have enough. So there's the balance between, do you want to create your own curriculum or do you want a very strict curriculum? But there's positives and benefits for bigger and smaller cities.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
So there's a question about free housing. What type of housing does this usually include? Is it a place where you could easily bring a significant other to be housed with, or is it free dorm type housing?
Yeah, no, I would say this, it all depends on the school, right? So usually it's a studio apartment. And what I would say is, let me just, can I share?
Yes.
Because I'm just pulling up one of our schools and they have two different options. Usually schools, especially I work with mostly very big schools, 5 to 20 foreign teachers and 5 to 20 Korean teachers. Unity works with schools as small as like just a couple or one foreign teacher to 20, but she has more like small to medium-sized schools. So for example, this one is one of our schools in Gimpo. And can I go through the slideshow? Oh, hold on. So you can see here, like this one is has like it's just one room, right? And then you have a small kitchen. There's a bathroom. Let me shoot. Sorry, how do I put that on the slideshow? I'm sorry. Let me just pull up another angle. This is another photo.
This is great to be able to have an idea of what to expect.
Where did it says I can't share this. Why can't I share this? No, this is always, people are always very like, well, what's it like? Well, here is exactly, there you go. That's very common. It's very Spartan. There's a bed, there's an air conditioning unit, a fan, a TV, a table. That's another very common look. Let me open another photo, just one more here, because always everybody's like, what's the bathroom like? Of course, that's important, right? Something like this, in most Americans, that you'll never have a bathtub unless you have like a new big apartment. I went 7 years and I never had a bathtub, but showers are like this. There's no like enclosure. it'll be something like this, and then you see the floor. It's basically like you stand there and you do everything within the bathroom. But the most important thing, it's clean. You know, and remember, it's free. Those are the most important things. Do you want me to share another photo or so, or is that enough? Or
Yeah, I think that's good. And we can always follow up with students if they have more specific questions. Yeah.
I
Thank
probably
you.
should have made a slide just showing like lots of different student housing, but anyway.
Yeah, no, no problem. Thank you. There's a question that a student has about the difference with work culture between North America and South Korea,
Yeah.
and what are the important aspects of culture to be aware of when you're working or teaching in Korea?
That's probably the biggest complaint by a lot of Americans or a lot of foreigners because they do things differently. And I said, being flexible and understanding, you know, I worked for the Korean government, which is very conservative. You know, and I actually did cross-cultural communication presentations to Koreans and also to foreigners, to foreign executives here in Korea. You know, remember, Americans, North Americans especially, we are Hofstede is like a professor that did studied this for 40 years. We are off the charts when it comes to individualism, and the opposite is collectivism. Koreans are highly collectivist. That means that, you know, we're kind of like in a pyramid, or actually American management is kind of like a pyramid, right? So the lower part would be like the regular workers, then different layers of management kind of going up, right? American manager may have a lot of employees, and there's a lot of in between back and forth, like, what's your opinion, get an answer, make my mind and choose. But Koreans, they're most I'd say almost all Korean men go through conscription. That means that they have to serve their 2 years plus in the Korean army. And what does that mean? Well, every one of them, that's how they manage. I'm the captain, you're the private. I tell you, you do. Complaints are minimized. And if you complain in front of people, regardless of the complaint, you are challenging my authority. So for in this situation, it's always best, instead of doing it in front of everybody, if you have something to say and you disagree, ask them to speak individually and privately, and then that way it causes a lot less problems. And I always say about flex and flexibility. You know, no one should stand for someone just unexpectedly coming to your house, regardless of the issue. Oh, I just wanted to check your meter for the whatever, you know, for the payment. No, that's something where you flex and say, no, nobody comes into my apartment. That's happened very few times, but I give this as an example. You know, and flexibility means that, you know, you're like, you have to realize, oh, well, they do things differently. You know, the number one knock on most private schools is the lack of communication, poor communication. Always the last to know. You know, it's like, oh, by the way, your new class started today. Oh, you're like, my new class? And oh, yeah, they're waiting for you right now. You're like, okay, that happens to every teacher at some time during your time in Korea. It's controlled chaos at times, right? And sometimes it's about because the manager's lack of English skills, or it's because, you know, they're busy doing something else and they don't tell you very well. I'm very happy. Most of the schools I work with, they're very well managed. They speak English very well. But you know, you'll be able to find that out from the interview. When you have an interview and you can see quickly what's their English level like. But the most thing I would always be aware of, be respectful. You know, even, you know, some Koreans, they say, oh, it's bali bali. It's like fast, 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 you know. They sometimes are very emotional, whereas I think more emotional than what you know, they may get upset, you know. I've heard teachers say they yelled. It's like, yeah, sometimes they do. And that's like a shock to some people, but I think that's kind of like the biggest difference in like in cultures, where, you know, it also depends. It's all the idiosyncrasies of the different managers or whoever that may be. But there's definitely differences, and it's usually cultural or communication.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Someone asked about, there's a couple of people who asked about specific cities, but just, you know, quickly, if we can talk a little bit about how easy or difficult it is to find jobs in Busan, because you mentioned it was difficult to find jobs in Seoul. So they wanted to know if it's difficult to find jobs in Busan or Daegu.
Or they do. Yeah, no, I would say we probably work with, 15 different schools in Daegu. So we place a lot of teachers in Daegu. Why? It's really popular. It's a 3 million, population city. It's super popular with expats, and we have a lot of schools there. So Daegu is a great place to go for your first year. But the thing is, most people who go to Daegu, they stay in Daegu. So if you want Seoul, but you should be flexible. The people who want to get placed, those are the people who are flexible. They say, okay, well, the people who say, I want Seoul, 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 and then after a month or two, and they don't get any interviews, and then realize they're like, okay, well, Gyeonggi-do, but only like close to Seoul. And then, if you say, okay, well, I want a major urban area, and then and then also if you say, nope, I don't want kindergarten, well, that already is 80% of the positions you're not being able to be considered for. Why? About 80% of positions are kindergarten in the morning, elementary school in the afternoon. About 20% are elementary school in the afternoon with some middle or high school. If you say, no, I want to teach adults, well, good luck. It's really hard to find full-time adult teaching positions unless you are a specialist in business English. And there's also not many of those jobs. Why? Most of those schools are 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. They hire part-time teachers instead of sponsoring a visa and giving housing, etc. Yeah, so I think number one, giving a good interview, making a self-introduction video. Number one thing is being flexible. Say, okay, well, I would like a major city or very large urban area. I'm okay for teaching younger kids. If you say, especially if you say, I don't want kindergarten, well, then you should be very flexible on location. That increases your place of getting your chances of getting placed.
Is that the case for Busan as well?
Busan's a different thing. Busan is super popular right now, but there's not as many schools like Seoul. I feel like there's so many more schools. Oh, of course, there's 12 million people. Busan's like 3 point something. But Busan is super popular, but it's also very competitive. It's like Seoul is number one, Busan's number two. So that's the same thing where Busan's kind of hard to get in, but we have lots of schools around Busan that are 30 minutes to an hour away. And also from Daegu to Busan is only an hour by car. So if you want Busan, you say, okay, well, I'm willing to teach in Daegu for a year, and then while you're in Korea, then all of a sudden you have a full year of ESL teaching experience and you're in country. It's easy to transfer a visa. So, I think people who say like, I really want Seoul or Busan, be flexible. Okay, instead of Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, instead of Busan, near Busan, Daegu. And then your second year, then do that. Then it's much easier to get into. Unless you're really well qualified, you have teaching experience, you have a bachelor's of education or English, linguistics, literature kind of background.
Thank you. Okay. So there's been a few questions about the apostille and the background check process. How long should folks start working on them? And then someone also asked about if they have a master's degree, should they also get that apostille as well?
Yeah, no, master's degree, remember the E2 visa only requires a bachelor's degree. So your master's degree has nothing to do with the visa process. That's just for you to show the school so that hopefully you get more money. But remember, if you have a master's degree in Russian literature, that's not really going to help you get more money for teaching English, right? That's one thing that people don't realize. If it's not related to teaching or English, then it doesn't really help you. So like I said, I can give a link afterwards, or before people finish, I can put it in the chat to the blog post. As I said, for sure, if you go through, if you Google first, approved FBI channelers, a list comes right up on the FBI website. There's at least 30 or 40 that are there. The first one on the list is accurate biometrics, or just type in live scan, LIVESCAN, and then your city name. They're normally in every major city. And then it only takes about 5 to 10 business days to get your FBI background check. If you go through monumentvisa.com, and if you follow my blog, it's on our website under blog posts. It says, how to get an apostille for an FBI background check. or a diploma within 3 business days. Step by step, it's easy to do. So you can have all your documents, even if you have no documents now, you have your diploma, but you don't have the copy apostille notarized, then you can have every document ready in 3 weeks. So
Thank
you're
you.
still okay if you're looking for September 1st. Remember, March 1st and September 1st are the 2 big hiring dates. That's like the start of the spring semester, start of the fall semester. But you know, it's rolling admission between March 1st and September 1st. Maybe 30% of the positions are somewhere in there. Maybe 30% March 1st, 30% September 1st. And then, you know, but after September, October, November, the jobs drop off. And then nobody hiring for December, January, even March 1st, people come at the end or middle of February. So most people don't start in December, January, or February, but the other months it's possible. The biggest selection is if you're, okay, I want March 1st or I want September 1st. That's where you're going to have the biggest selection of jobs.
Oh, perfect. Thank you
The
so
best
much.
chance of getting placed.
And we'll make sure to include that blog link as well with the application link at the end in the follow-up. So we have some questions about if you already speak Korean or if you've already been to Korea. There's also a question about if you've been in the military. Are some of these things perks when you're applying for, you know, are they things that will give you an advantage when you're applying for jobs in Korea?
Yeah, I would say specifically, if you know any Korean, and especially if you say that during your interview, I think that's very helpful. Oh, it's direct. I just, Student Affairs direct message, I just sent you the link. Can you send that out to everybody? That's the link for the blog post. For getting an FBI or getting a,
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I lost what you were saying. You said about if you speak
Yeah,
Korean.
if you speak Korean, or if you've studied in Korea or lived in Korea before or in the military.
Yeah, so there's well, it's different levels of it though. If you've traveled to South Korea or you've studied in South Korea or you've lived in South Korea in the military, all of that's great. Why? They think that you're not gonna, because every single person goes through culture shock. Every single person gets homesick, right? And I told you there's a big learning curve. That first 3 or 4 months is really hard because you have to really prepare well for your classes, and that you're spending several hours a day doing curriculum, preparing for classes. But after that 3rd or 4th month, it gets piss easy. Why? You're just cycling through the kids. You're teaching exactly the same stuff. So instead of preparing, making a new lesson, you're just modifying what you think, oh, that didn't work so well last time. Let me change that little bit here or there. So it becomes super easy. So if you've lived in South Korea, traveled to South Korea, you speak a bit of Korean, for sure mention that in your interview, because that's really helpful for getting hired. Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're just going to wrap up with a couple of remaining questions. I'll try to combine them so you can answer them as quickly as possible. But some folks have asked generally, just in general, how early they should apply, and what are some general advice you have for the visa process to get started, when to get started, and things of that nature.
Right. Like I said, the visa process takes about a month. So we're still now hiring for July, August, September, some October, but normally about 3 months before you're expected, like I want to start, 3 months from now, that's the time that you want to be applying for jobs. 4 months or 5 months before, the schools have a long time to choose. So they're very, very picky. But if it's, 2 months before the start date, they're a lot less picky. So even people who are really well qualified, they'll be like, oh, well, we're having 5 interviews and we'll just, unless someone knocks our socks off, we're just going to keep looking because we have lots of time. But what you'll see is a lot of ASAP positions. That means as soon as you get your visa, they want you to come. That's when they're like, okay, well, we thought you gave an okay interview. If it's good enough, we'll hire you. Whereas that same person that interviewed a month earlier, they're like, oh, your interview was good, but I'm still going to check to see who else I can hire. So, so get your ducks in a row, get your documents done, and then apply at least 3 months before, or 2 months before. Even now, if you say, I don't have any documents, well, you can have them in 3 weeks. That means that if you start the process, hey, Brad, I applied through a channeler for my FBI background check. It should take about 1 to 2 weeks. Oh, and then you should be able to get your apostille notarization another week. So that means in about 3 weeks, you'll have your documents. That means I can start having you interview for September positions because you'll have your documents in time. And it takes about a month on average for the visa process, depending where you live. But so once we know, and you have to keep us updated, like, okay, well, I got the FBI background check. They sent me it as an email, the PDF. Now I'm going to apply for the FBI or for the apostille. Keeping us in the loop about your progress makes it easier for us about placement. Like we know, oh, well, you're looking for these areas. Oh, that job starts then. Oh, you'll fit the time frame, etc. So planning it out is good.
Okay, and the last two questions. One is, what does the health check entail? If you can briefly just touch on that, and then the last question that we can briefly touch on is, how do you? Someone asked about the levels of students you get assigned. If you can choose, more advanced students, or if you just get assigned whoever.
So the first one, the easiest one, is the health check. It asks, are you an alcoholic? Are you a drug addict? Do you have any mental health disorders? Do you take any drugs for mental health disorders? So if you check yes to any of those three, you probably have a hard time getting a visa. The third one about do you take any medication for mental health issues? As long as you get a letter from your doctor that explains why you're taking it, or we had someone who they were very honest on the form, and they said, oh, in university 3 years ago, I took Prozac for 6 weeks after a hard breakup with my boyfriend, and they got denied a visa, even though that was 3 years earlier. And it was very understandable because remember, the immigration officer who's handling your visa, it's completely up to them. They could just say, no, I don't want to approve it. And some will be like very understanding. So, I tell everybody this: either you can be very honest, get a letter, and put that the reasoning on there, and we talk to the school and tell them this is what you're taking. Most schools are very understanding. This is much different than 5 years ago. And some people, maybe they don't want to say, so they don't take their medication for the week before they take their drug test, because it takes about 5 to 7 days for chemical drugs like medications to not show up on a drug test. That's the only way they would know unless you tell them. So I tell people that's the two different options. You can either stop taking it for a week or two and then resume taking it. Because you can go to, like, for example, Yonsei Severance Hospital, Dr. Linton. He's an American. His parents were missionaries here in Korea. He wrote the medical board examination in English. He's native speaker. He's born in Seoul, raised in Seoul. He's lived here, not in America. You can get any type of medication in Korea, or you can get a year's worth from your doctor and bring it to Korea. Either way is fine. They don't share that information with your school or immigration. So we always just tell people that's your option. The second question, I'm sorry, what was the second question? Do you choose your level? No.
Yeah.
If it's kindergarten, that's the hard part. Is it could be 3-year-olds, which are, we would say, nursery students, or pre-kindergarten. There could, we call them the baby class. It could be, usually it's 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, right? Or no, 3, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. So they may go to kindergarten for 4 years, right? So you may have upper kindergarten, you could have all 4 kindergarten. If you teach all 4 levels of kindergarten, then you're going to teach less elementary school. And the hardest thing for teachers, if you're teaching the elementary school in the afternoon, you could have kids that their levels, some are here and some are here in the same class. Why? It's their age. If you put a kid who's older in a class that their kids are a year or two younger because it's an appropriate level, that kid will not go more than a month because they'll be embarrassed. So they'll stick kids in your class that are like way different levels. And it's your responsibility to be able to adapt and be able to teach that. There's different strategies I can tell you about how to do that. But you know, that's one of the hardest things I think about teaching in private schools is delivering content at different levels. They're normally going to be very similar, but you may have some kids that are like stuck in there because you know they've never had an English class. And they put them in third grade, where other kids have been going to Hagwon for 4 years, so it's really different. But yeah, that's a challenge, but it's a challenge you have to overcome.
All right, thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, I think we'll close for now. We'll close here. But if you all have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Student Affairs at internationalteflacademy.com and to Brad if you plan to work with TEIK. We've dropped the link to the application to work with TEIK. Some of you asked if it was a cost.
It's at the end of the presentation. There's actually the link
Yes.
at the end of the presentation. You can just
yes.
copy and paste it.
Yes, we'll send you all the presentation slide and the link as well to both the blog and the application for TEIK as well. It's free of charge for you to work with them. So we highly encourage you to apply directly with the recruiter, because as you saw, this is a very lengthy process and intricate process. So Brad will walk you through every steps of the way. So
and it's our pleasure to do it as well. You know, it's like as everybody probably can understand, I did exactly what you're doing. I know, you know, I came to Korea through serendipity. Can I say for 1 minute how I came to Korea, if you don't mind?
sure.
I went to Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, and this is a true story. It's like straight out of a movie. I was in my university coffee shop and I was talking on my phone, and I had applied for the JET program, the Japan English Teaching Program, and I wanted to teach for a year in China, China or Japan, and then maybe 1 or 2 years, both countries, then come back and start my teaching life in Washington State. And I had missed the cutoff date. They'd hired all the teachers early, and I hung up my phone, and this girl sitting behind me taps me on the shoulder and says, you know, I'm really sorry, but I overheard your conversation. Have you ever thought about teaching in Korea? And I was like, no, I never heard about it. And she's like, well, there's a recruiter. He's a PLU grad. He's a Lut, and he's on South Tacoma Way. Here's his business card. I just went and saw him today. My friend, you know, made a ton of money, saved a bunch of money, had a great time. I called him up, went and saw him. And while we're talking, he goes, oh, just a minute. Oh, and he calls somebody. He goes, oh, talk to this person. And they're like, oh, you know, tell us about yourself, you know, whatever. I talked to them for 10 minutes. And then he's like, oh, would you mind going to Korea in about a month? And I said, sure. Remember, I just got back from being a student in the UK for 2 years, 2.5 years. I came back with my student teaching. And so I was just bartending at Olive Garden and, you know, all through college. And he called me back about 4 or 5 days later. He goes, can you leave like this week? And I was like, oh shit, I guess I could. You know, it's fate. There was no Google, there was no Wikipedia. I said, where am I going? And he goes, oh, you're going to Bucheon. I said, where's Bucheon? He goes, oh, let me get a map. And I was like, you don't know where I'm going? It's that small? And he's like, no, I just want to show you on the map. And it's, you know, it's a beautiful, it's a big city. And it changed my life. You know, I taught for a year, and I got a job in Japan. I was going to come back to the States afterwards, and I met my wife, and the Japan teaching job kind of went out the window. So my point being is, you know, I've been through every step that you've been through. I know exactly how it is and what you're feeling and that excitement, that kind of scariness. But, you know, it's an adventure, and I really hope that you choose to go, not even through me, but I just hope that you do choose to teach in Korea, because literally it was a life-changing experience for me. So that's my pitch for Korea. And of course, I hope that you work with us, but you know, I really hope that you do go to Korea. You'll have a really good time, and you'll save a lot of money.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brad. That was so inspiring. And honestly, we can't encourage you all long enough to, you know, consider Korea as a market. And actually, Jasira also dropped a link to our podcast. We have an ITA podcast that way, so you can listen to Amanda Kaim's experience as well of teaching in Korea, in addition to all the wonderful experiences that Brad shared with us. So again, we encourage you all to work with TEIK. Thank you all so much for attending the webinar. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email us at Student Affairs as well. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you for attending or watching. Yeah.